Okay, we can start.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the ASEAN EU Connectivity Seminar. This event is co-organized by the EU Mission to ASEAN and the Permanent Mission of the Republic of Singapore to ASEAN. I am Diki Walat from the ASEAN Secretariat, and I will be your MC for this seminar. Before we start, we would like to remind you of the following information to ensure the smooth running of this event. First, please note that this seminar will be recorded. Second, kindly ensure that your microphone is muted at all times if you're not speaking. Lastly, if you have any questions, kindly use the chat function and send them to the moderators. Do send your question to Ambassador Copley Pang for panel 1 and to Mr. Lim Shu-chin for panel 2. Please indicate your name, organization, and the name of the speaker you would like to address your questions to. Based on our record, we have more than 200 registered participants. On behalf of the organizers, we would like to thank you for joining us in this special event on connectivity. This seminar will feature 2 panel discussions, and there will be a 15-minute break between the 2 sessions. We are delighted to have senior representatives from governments, financial institutions, research institutes, and the private sector from ASEAN and the EU. The first panel will discuss the approaches to connectivity in both regions, while the second panel will talk about sustainable infrastructure investment in ASEAN. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce you to the moderator of the first panel, Ambassador Copley Pang, Permanent Representative of the Republic of Singapore to ASEAN and Country Coordinator for the ASEAN-EU Dialogue Relations. Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Diki, and a warm welcome to all the participants and all the panelists who have joined us online today. We were meant to have this seminar much earlier, but due to the pandemic, we had to put on hold our plans for a while. But thanks to the wonders of modern technology, here we are today. Our panel has 5 very preeminent speakers. Each of them has 5 minutes to tackle this vast topic. I'm confident they will do this justice. If you have questions, please address them to the Zoom group chat. We will pick out common threads and themes and direct them to the panelists to address. So without further ado, I'd like to call upon the first speaker on the panel, His Excellency Ambassador Tran Duc Bin, who is my boss for the year since Vietnam is both chair of ASEAN, and Ambassador Bin is also the chair of the ASEAN Connectivity Coordinating Committee. On the ACCC, members are entrusted with the monitoring and implementation of the Master Plan on ASEAN Connectivity 2025. It is an ambitious document that aims to link ASEAN in physical, digital, and people-to-people ways. So take it away, Ambassador Bin. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Ambassador Lee Peng, for the introduction. First of all, I have to express my sincere appreciation to the European Union and Singapore as country coordinator for ASEAN EU dialogue relations, and in particular to Ambassador Copley Pang and Ambassador Igor. For virtual webinar. Of course, connectivity is a very important element in ASEAN community building. If you recall that the first was launched in 2010, about 10 years ago, with the focus on enhancing the region's physical infrastructures, institutions, and people-to-people relations. And following the first Master Plan 2010 in 2016, ASEAN adopted a master plan on ASEAN connectivity 2025 called Impact 2025 as a succeeding document. Under our ASEAN in 2020, under the theme of cohesive ASEAN, connectivity features very high on the agenda, and it is actually the number work of connectivity and to promote further promote regional integration, enhancing ASEAN. We to enhancing ASEAN capacity on the fourth industrial revolution, and so far the ASEAN master plan on connectivity 2020 is progressing well. We have even though it's into the fourth year of implementation, a lot of activities have been realized, while a number of others are being put into implementation. Of course, in the current economic situation caused by COVID-19 pandemic, it is a very, very important task of how we can work together to bring the tangible benefit from connectivity to people, while a lot of disruptions are being caused by COVID-19. And one other aspect is that how we can mobilize further resources, financial resources.
Thank you everyone for the feedback on the sound and the connectivity. We're checking with Vietnam again. And we'll try to rectify that and bring Ambassador Bin online again soon. So in the meantime, I'd like to give the floor to our second speaker, Mr. Jean-Louis Ville. I hope I got that right.
Absolutely.
He is currently the Acting Director for Asia, Central Asia, Middle East, the Gulf and the Pacific in the EU Directorate General for International Cooperation and Development. Without further ado, Jean-Louis, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm extremely pleased to be with you today. I hope the connection will be good enough for the next 5 minutes so that you can hear me loud and clear. I would like to elaborate a few points, 3, on what connectivity means to us. First of all, in a post-COVID world, more than ever, I think we need internal and cross-border cooperation. This is obvious, but I mean, it's been quite reinforced as we see the pandemic developing. That means trying to find ways to indeed connect the connectivities. And this is a good starting point, I think, since too often we look at connectivity initiatives in a competitive sense. Indeed, while the fundamental pillars of the EU strategy are those of reciprocity as well as sustainability, sustainability means the long-term interest of those who are actually trying to assist in relation to social, environmental, climate, and fiscal principles. That means we need to pursue common approaches, since connectivity should be inclusive, enabling and can be a powerful driver in delivering the SDG as well as the known global infrastructure deficit. This seminar is a great opportunity to do so, furthering our work on connectivity and identifying potential synergies between the Connecting Europe, Asia, the EU strategy on the one hand, and the master plan on ASEAN connectivity 2025, including through the connectivities approach on the other hand. My second point is related to climate sustainability. The pandemic provides a foretaste of what a full-fledged climate crisis could entail in terms of simultaneous exogenous shocks to supply and demand and disruption of supply chains. We can envisage how the pandemic may influence the pace of nature of climate actions and how climate actions could accelerate the recovery by creating jobs, driving capital formation, and increasing economic resilience. This is why climate sustainability is fundamental to the EU and its European Green Deal. And this is the basis on which we would like to engage with key partners such as ASEAN, but also on all other connectivity initiatives. In that regard, our 50 million contribution to the ASEAN Catalytic Green Finance Facility, ACGF, will serve as an excellent means to promoting green infrastructure investments in sectors such as energy, transport, water, urban development, agriculture, and possibly forestry. Another example is the new Regional ASEAN Forest Governance Program, which is worth 5 million, which provides support for regional dialogues, coordination, exchanges connecting ASEAN and its member states, major trade partners in the forestry sectors, including EU, but not only EU, China, Japan, and South Korea should be part of that picture. My third point, very shortly, is related to the cooperation. While we continue to look forward in our ambitions, sometimes it's also good to take stock of what we have accomplished already in our long-standing cooperation and on connectivity issue with ASEAN. Very rapidly, over the last 7 years, the EU has contributed over 250 million euro alone to regional cooperation, much of which focuses on connectivity. A considerable part of that, our bilateral assistance to the ASEAN member states also holds a strong connectivity focus, like for example in Vietnam, where over 100 million euro EU contribution went to the energy sector. And while the connectivity debate often focuses on hard infrastructure, we also recognize the fundamental importance of soft connectivity. In that regard, trade has a fundamental part of it, and this is where Arise Plus directly supports the master plan on ASEAN connectivity by developing regulatory policy frameworks to enable trade facilitation and many trade-related issues, including intellectual property rights, food safety, and implementation of the free trade agreement. The setting up and the entry into operation of the ASEAN customs and transit system this year will be a key achievement in that regard, and as it will ease cross-border land transport and will enormously benefit to both EU and the ASEAN businesses operating in the region. Arise Plus focus on civil aviation's support to building the ASEAN single aviation market and strengthening ASEAN-EU cooperation in air transport. That has also supported the ongoing negotiations on the EU-ASEAN Comprehensive Air Transport Agreement. I will let DG Move, my colleague Harvey Rouse, to elaborate on this later on. The digital and people-to-bill agenda are also two key pillars of the EU connectivity strategy, and our policy dialogue facility e-Ready strengthening the links between citizens, digital infrastructure, road transport, science and research cooperations. Meanwhile, EU Share and Erasmus Plus facilitates student mobility across and within the regions. Just to give you a figure, since 2014, over 5,500 students, staff from ASEAN universities have received scholarships, and nearly 3,200 European students and staff have been taken up work on study on ASEAN countries under the Erasmus Plus program. Finally, during the EU-ASEAN dialogue on sustainable development last February, our Commissioner and Foreign Minister of Thailand as ASEAN coordinator for sustainable development, agreed to continue our exchanges on these areas and identified connectivity as a cross-cutting concept that can promote both regional inclusive growth and Agenda 2030. So clearly, we have a broad-ranging approach to support connectivity in ASEAN, and overall, we have a great success story for corporations. As we move through the process of the future programming exercise, it will now be essential to look back at our achievements and see where we think we can improve in a post-COVID context. I'll just say a last word regarding our approach, which is now the new way we want to approach, is we call Team Europe approach, which is working together with our member states, where we want to continue enhancing intra-ASEAN and EU-ASEAN connectivity as a key area of our partnership. As such, we foresee our cooperation with ASEAN to remain at near current levels in the new financial phases, with a stronger focus on sustainable investment and guarantees. Whatever that means, focusing more strongly on enabling medical research collaborations, digitalization, or supply chain, and beyond. ASEAN will continue to be a priority for us, there's no doubt, and we are looking forward to keep building on the good work we've already done. Thank you very much for allowing me to participate.
Thank you very much, Jean-Louis. Almost within the 5-minute time frame. I think you've raised a couple of interesting points and given us a good outline of the existing cooperation between the EU and ASEAN. And now I'd like to try again with Ambassador Bin. Do we have you here, Ambassador? Ambassador Bin, are you with us in the room?
Yes, I am, but I cannot turn on my video. But anyway, I
okay,
will not.
We can hear you loud and clear.
Well, just very briefly. First, point number one is that we have been working on ASEAN connectivity for 10 years now. Now we are into the 4th year of the AMPAC 2025, which is a succeeding document of AMPAC 2010. And the progress so far has been pretty good. We are implementing the rest of the activities that are being planned for this year. And despite point number to people, connectivity is very high, and ASEAN is working with all partners, including the EU, to seek the support and learn from the experience and the AMPAC 2025 fast forward. And in this regard, seminar is very useful, where we can discuss how we can connect AMPAC 2025 with the strategies of the EU. I understand that 2018 EU launched the joint connecting EU, Europe and Asia, building blocks for EU strategy. And I think it's timely that we talk about this and find a way how we can, infrastructure, technology, trade and investment, and especially as mentioned, speaker on aviation. I think that's very important. We have to test point number 3 that despite COVID-19, we would have to look for measures and opportunities to mitigate the impact, taking advantage of the existing connections between ASEAN and the EU. and further strengthen that. And we have to be realistic, but at the same time ambitious in our approach, meaning that we need to look at both policy issues as well as the physical, the hard infrastructure issues. And I think as soon as we can work out the way how we can bring the EU and ASEAN closer through connectivity, then it's will serve as the common understanding and the basis for us to move forward to the next stage of an ASEAN-EU FTA, which is, I believe, is the common desire for both ASEAN and the EU. So I would like those 3 points that I have, and I would like to express my appreciation to you, Ambassador Li Peng, and the EU Ambassador Igor Drisman, for organizing this very important and meaningful seminar. And I look forward to further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency, for your 3 very pertinent points. Let's try to catch up with the schedule. Our next speaker is Mr. Harvey Roos, Head of Unit International Relations, EU Directorate General for Mobility and Transport. Mr. Roos, you have 5 minutes. Take it away. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador, and a very good morning to you all, or a very good afternoon to you all, depending where you are. So it really is a pleasure for me to be with you today, albeit, of course, via a computer screen. But I'm sure we would have all liked to have been in person, but I think we're all happy that we can also connect remotely. First of all, dear participants, I hope all your families and colleagues are safe and well. We're living in challenging times, but this has also shown, I think, how effective transport links are so important to us. Now, I'm one who loves citing famous people, and Aristotle actually said that it's during the darkest moments that we focus to see the light. And certainly, while I can't be physically with you today, it really is a pleasure, because ASEAN is my favorite region. I was posted in the delegation in Jakarta for Indonesia and Brunei Darussalam and ASEAN, indeed, as head of the trade section. And it's really pleasing to be with dear friends today. Now, I know that distinguished colleagues on this panel will be presenting insights, if you like, on the geopolitical context. So I wanted to more home in on really transport, why it's important, of what we are doing to enhance it and deepen it. But first of all, must say that in the area of transport, the EU and ASEAN, we enjoy really very constructive relations. Back in 2017, we established what is known as a EU-ASEAN transport dialogue. And we are really honored there, because we are the only non-Asian transport dialogue partner with ASEAN. And connectivity, of course, is very much part of that dialogue agenda, as we cover all modes of transport. Now, on this slide that you can see on the screens, it really shows why transport and connectivity is so important to the EU and ASEAN. Now, one major reason, of course, is our trade relations. Bilateral merchandise trade has almost doubled over the last decade to over 260 billion euros. The EU is by far the largest investor in ASEAN economies, with a solid investment stock of 330 billion, and that figure has almost doubled in just 4 years. And also, according to ASEAN records, in 2018 alone, the EU had invested more than twice as much as China and 2.5 times as much as the US. So in terms of trade and investment, we have very important relations. And much of the success of that has depended on safe, secure, and effective transport links. Now, pre-COVID-19, tourism between the EU and ASEAN was also booming, and I'm sure that it will bounce back. Now, from this slide, you can see that both passengers and freight have been steadily increasing between the EU and ASEAN since 1996. And in fact, in 2018, there were more than 11 million passengers traveling between the EU and ASEAN. So to state the obvious, we would not be able to have the transport of goods and to ensure this people-to-people connectivity if we did not have regular flights and maritime links, for that matter, between our regions. Therefore, connectivity for me is about having effective, sustainable, safe, secure transport links between countries and regions. And the interoperability increasingly of those transport links really does enhance that connectivity. And therefore, that is the key enabler for trade and people-to-people connections. And we must do our utmost to enhance that transport connectivity. However, we must do it in the most sustainable way forward, and sustainable in the broader sense, from the environmental, social, financial, fiscal points of view. If we can go to the next slide, please. One of the most obvious examples of real connectivity, and Jean-Louis, the previous speaker just before, Ambassador Tran Duc Bin, talked about the EU-ASEAN Comprehensive Air Transport Agreement. Now, once this is agreed, and we look forward to this being the case very, very soon, it will be the first ever region-to-region open skies agreement. I'll repeat that, the first ever region-to-region. It will cover 37 countries in total, and it will help create favorable travel conditions to over 1 billion people. So it will not only facilitate market access between regions, but it will also cover social, environmental, air traffic management aspects of air connectivity. Another example I would like to share is about sharing the intra-regional connectivity experience. So aviation is growing fast in ASEAN countries, and the region faces similar challenges like we do: increasing congestion in your skies, delays, and of course, increasing carbon dioxide emissions. Next slide, please. In the EU, we have really accumulated some valuable experience, of course, in having a single aviation market and a single European sky. And the Arise Plus program that Jean-Louis cited there enables us to share this experience with ASEAN. Our experts from the European Aviation Safety Agency have been working to enhance the ASEAN single aviation market and the seamless ASEAN sky. And they also help improve air traffic management, which increases fuel efficiency, which also helps reduce emissions. So these are very good examples, I think, of our cooperation on connectivity and showing that it's very strong. We're not starting from zero. I believe that in order to further strengthen EU-ASEAN connectivity cooperation, we do not therefore need to reinvent the wheel. We can use the experience and build on it. And this is already being established through sectoral dialogues, as I said. The EU strategy for connecting Europe and Asia and the master plan on ASEAN connectivity 2025, they offer us paths, if you like, where we can do more. At the same time, while looking into these guiding documents, we should also take into account our top priorities. One of the pillars of the ASEAN's master plan is sustainable infrastructure, which includes smart urbanization. Transport accounts for about a quarter of the EU's greenhouse gas emissions, and it's still growing. Europe is investing in smart solutions for transport, which can help us improve traffic management in cities, reduce congestion and CO2 emissions. And in this way, we ensure that we deliver on the ambitious objectives set out in the European Green Deal. And I'm sure many on this session today will have heard of that. Now, if we look at transport in the European Green Deal, we will look at reducing transport emissions by 90% by 2050. And that's a top priority. The EU-ASEAN agreed at our last transport dialogue meeting in June last year that we would work together in developing smart urban transport solutions. Now, just to wrap up, the next slide, which is the last one, there are other areas where we can engage. If you can turn to the next slide, please. There are other areas where we can engage, and that's the development of transport networks. And the EU has excelled in developing our transport networks over the past 20 years. Please, if you could turn the slide, please. We've established a robust system for prioritization of infrastructure projects. And we have very much done the trans-European networks, which was mentioned by Ambassador Tran Duc Bin. And we're not just stopping there. We are extending this network. If we could have the next slide, please. I think it's not turned over. We can have the next slide. We can see it. We can see that we are extending our trans-European networks to cross-border neighborhood countries. There we are, in the Western Balkan and Eastern Partnership region, as well as the Mediterranean. And ASEAN countries too have many initiatives on how to strengthen intra-regional networks, which makes it another area where we can certainly collaborate. And I would say especially, of course, on rail, where the EU has a lot of experience. My final point is, since His Excellency, Ambassador Tran Duc Bin, the chair of the ASEAN Connectivity Coordinating Committee, is on this panel, I wanted to cite a famous Vietnamese proverb, which states that a day of traveling will bring a basket full of learning. Well, I'm very pleased today that our learning is being facilitated by the digital wizardry that we have before us with Zoom, but I'm sure as we successfully come out of these challenging times, it will be transport again and enhanced sustainable connectivity that will, as ever, be the linchpin bringing ASEAN and EU ever closer together. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Javi. That was a very engaging presentation and very clear. It's already excited a few questions, which we will share with you shortly. I think Javi touches on a very critical point that amidst a pandemic, the need to connect is still strong. And we're doing this through digital means, which today, unfortunately, is a little spotty. I apologize for that. No telling how the digital elves or gremlins are in ascendance at any given moment. But it is a fact that nothing beats a physical encounter, especially in our field of work. And I think everyone's cheering on our scientists to find a vaccine or a cure, medicine as soon as possible, so that we can all get onto planes and start reconnecting in a face-to-face mode. Now, I'm very pleased to invite our next speaker, Mr. Asad Beg, who is the advisor to the Ambassador at Large for Connectivity of the EU External Action Service. Mr. Beg has also served as the head of political press and information affairs at the delegation of the EU to China, as well as postings in Kazakhstan and Hong Kong. Mr. Beg, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Li Peng, and also thank you to the organizers and also Ambassador Igor Driesmans. I noticed that we started with a song by Adele, Hello from the Other Side, and I was just looking at that, and she says that, Adele says that this song is all about reconnecting. Hello is about reconnecting with everyone and myself, she said, and getting from the other side is about Adele feeling guilt that she's away from her child and that she needs to work on this. So I think that that's also about connectivity. I tried to explain to I have 3 children, 3 daughters. I tried to explain to them what is my understanding of connectivity. Could I have the first slide, please? I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you. So I think what I understand is it's also the power of three. What are the three things that come to mind for connectivity? Number one, I think it's about people. We realized during the COVID-19 crisis, we were standing, I'm here just near my balcony, we were connecting with people, even though we were physically away. We needed to then engage with people. So we are almost homo connectors. People need connectivity. The second thing is about the planet. I think we are connecting with the planet. COVID-19 has also shown us the importance of sustainability in all its aspects, including green connectivity. And then I think the third thing is partnership. We work together between the EU and the member states. I think connectivity is in our DNA. We've been working on the single market. It's also about the private sector and connecting the public and the private together. And as mentioned by the previous speakers, by Harvey and also Jean-Louis, it's about hard and soft connectivity. And if I look at if I take my euro note out from my wallet, the common thing is the bridges. So we are building bridges. Bridges are there, and I think financing is going to be key. If I try to turn to the next slide, sorry. So what I will do is I'll talk about three areas. Why is connectivity important? What is the 4-3-2-1 model of connectivity as we see it? And then connecting connectivities. So why is it important? I think connectivity it's the foundation of global growth and trade. It's like an artery for the world. And I think we need to keep our supply chains open, safe. We receive food on our table and medicines and masks thanks to transport connectivity. We are working also thanks to digital connectivity, and we have power because of energy. And I think the cost of non-connectivity we've all seen, but we need to move forward and to have something that is safe and secure for the future. What I'd like to do is, on the next slide, is try to explain the 4 pillars. And I think those have been enumerated and explained by my colleagues as well. So I think transport is of course key to have safe and secure links. Energy, we need it also to be interconnected and also to power our growth. Digital, we need e-health, e-commerce, e-governance, dare I say. And I think this is going to be we are connected now to the other side from Europe and ASEAN, thanks to digital connectivity. And the key thing is the human dimension, because we will be having think tanks, entrepreneurs, young leaders, media, civil society. We all need to work together in partnership. So those are the 4 pillars of the connectivity strategy as we see it. We then have three parts of this triangle, 3 work streams. The first one, from the European Union side, oh, sorry, I need to be re-educated by my daughter on PowerPoint. But there we have 3 areas are looking at partnership, also looking at networks, and also looking at financing. As regards the 2 principles that you see at the top of the screen, that is the principle of sustainability, as mentioned by colleagues. It's not only green, but financial, social, economic, and fiscal. And then you see the level playing field. We want to engage with our business on equal terms with all others. And I think our overall goal is prosperity at home and abroad. So that's the 4 pillars, the 3 parts of the triangle, and our 2 principles and the 1 common goal. I'll now turn to on the 3rd part, which is now looking at connecting connectivities. So we have a partnership, and I think Ambassador Li Peng was asking why we have a picture of, I mean, the explanation is that this is our first partnership. We're looking at quality infrastructure and sustainable connectivity between the European Union and Japan, working in the world, including in the in the Asia Pacific region. And I was looking at the statistics. 70% of German businesses are in Japan, not because of the Japanese market per se, but they are there in order to work together with their counterparts in ASEAN and other markets in the world. So I think this is the first, but not the last connectivity partnership that the EU is engaged in. My next slide is then looking at connecting the connectivities. I think, as mentioned by my colleagues and the ambassador from Vietnam, we have many synergies between our vision of connectivity from the European Union side and also the vision and strategy and plans and financing from ASEAN. So I think as we work forward, I think there are many areas where we can translate these commitments into actions and build on the substantive work that we've already done, as was mentioned by my colleagues, Jean-Louis and Harvey. I would like to also end with a quote from, today is the first day of the German presidency. We heard from the ancient thinkers, and also I would like to quote from von Goethe, a German and also world thinker, who said, "Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has 3 ingredients: genius, power, and magic." And I think those can also inspire us today to renew our connections and not hello to the other side, but greetings and cooperation and friendship. And I hope we can work together between the European Union and ASEAN on our common goal for prosperity, peace, and stronger partnership for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Asad. That was a very interesting presentation, especially the 4-3-2-1 EU strategy. Very clear, and I particularly enjoyed the way you elucidated that. And now our 5th panelist, who has been given a daunting task of explaining the geopolitical context. I'm kidding. She is Anita. She's the Director of Policy Relations at the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia, or AREA, which is based in Jakarta. Anita has also worked in the government of India, including with the Niti Aoyog Planning Commission. Sorry if I mangled that pronunciation. Right. Anita, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. So, of course, as we know, Harvey, Asad, and Jean-Louis have already enumerated all the micro information that is already there in the EU-ASEAN connectivity. It's doing pretty well, if I may say so. Of course, there is always a scope for enlargement, deepening. Particularly of interest was the transport connectivity, which was presented earlier. But my job is, we being located in Jakarta and keeping an eye on the entire region, so to speak, my job is to put the EU-ASEAN connectivity in the larger regional perspective and to present before both ASEAN and EU is what sort of a margin is available in which the EU-ASEAN connectivity will work in the future. So this will be valid both for your short-term planning as well as for the longer-term planning. So therefore, the basic metaphysical question is that why are we even emphasizing on connectivity when EU-ASEAN connectivity is doing rather well, if I may say so. The reason being is that a new regional architecture is morphing in this region. Asia Pacific is giving way to Indo-Pacific, which is, which as some narrators say, is a slightly more inclusive architecture than Asia Pacific was. So, and in this new architecture, incremental changes that brought about economic dynamism in East Asia, that may no longer work because the issues under question are that partners, ASEAN, the other +6 partners, including dialogue partners like EU, must take very clear and unambiguous position on issues of security, governance, multilateralism, territorial sovereignty, sustainable development. So in all this, ASEAN is finding a new role altogether for itself and in redefining its centrality itself. So ASEAN's new centrality is now very much in creating connectivities in Indo-Pacific. So my slides are not here. If I may, okay, all right. So I go to the next slide, and I cannot seem to move it. Can someone from the hosting team help me in changing the slides? Can we move to the next slide, please? Yes, thank you. So ASEAN has, up till the present, maintained connectivity with various institutional arrangements such as APEC, ASEAN +3, ASEAN +6, that's the East Asia Summit. India, US, Russia, EU, Canada, all are its dialogue partners, although Africa is still missing in this conversation. The Impact 2011, RCEP, these were all the instruments that ASEAN has been using very successfully so far. However, it's the future that is really important now. For future also, ASEAN has Impact 2025 and the ASEAN Outlook on Indo-Pacific ready. The Impact 2025 is already in progress. But at the same time, ASEAN's dialogue partners have also got various plans in hand, and which includes free and open Indo-Pacific, the ASEAN-India connectivity, the Belt and Road Initiative, the Asia-Africa Growth Corridor, and of course, the building block towards strategy of connecting EU and Asia, which was brought about in 2018. So among all this, how are we going to define connectivity for this region, and how would EU-ASEAN connectivity actually move forward in the years to come? Can we go to the next slide, please? Next, yes, thank you very much. So according to this slide, and if we go by the task that we were given before the panel started, was how to define connectivity in this age when there are several connectivity ideas and plans floating around in the Indo-Pacific region. The first 3 bullet points very, very briefly summarize it. Connectivity is an international strategy for growth. It is a recognized pathway for narrowing development gaps among regions and within the region. And connectivity is indispensable for achieving Agenda 2030. However, for policymakers, more details are required, and those details can only be found in the contours of connectivity as we see it in this region, and that is how EU-ASEAN connectivity in future should respond to. That we are not inventing the wheel here. Connectivity has always existed. The only thing is that contemporary issues in governance, transparency, technological advancements, digital transformations, these are what people's choices. These are the issues, those are guiding the new calibrations in connectivity in the region. And important thing is, and this is how in fact, MPAC also defines connectivity, is that the G20 principles on quality infrastructure also define it thus, that connectivity must improve economic and social well-being. But most importantly, and this is a sort of a litmus test, is that connectivity must create trust among partners. It should also be remembered what connectivity must not be. And connectivity cannot be a foil for regional hegemony, either of strategic kind or of economic kind. So in this ecology, we are looking at this taxonomy of connectivity plans in the Indo-Pacific region. It's a slightly intense, so it can be left for more micro explanations during the question answer session. But enough, it will be suffice to say that when EU proposed the building block towards strategy for EU-Asia connectivity, it definitely came very close to the master plan on ASEAN connectivity in particular, and the templates of sustainable, rule-based and comprehensive connectivity outlined in the EU-Asia strategy appears to be an ideal template for connectivity in Indo-Pacific also, and in navigating this whole smorgasbord of connectivity plans and proposals that are there in Indo-Pacific. I will finally conclude with one chart which is of immense importance for EU-Asia. And it is this: the trade was earlier covered in the earlier presentation, but it's important to see here that the trade with EU's trade with ASEAN, that is almost 1/3 of that of China. And the trade with ASEAN +6, which is the East Asia Summit region, is almost 6 times larger than what it is with ASEAN. So here, the automatic conclusion is that when EU-ASEAN connectivity works in the larger perspective of East Asia, then only you are really getting your value for money, or the value addition from the EU-ASEAN connectivity. And finally, of course, I will end my presentation here, but happy to take any more questions on the points and bullets that we left behind. So with that, I'll end, Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Anita. That was a heroic effort to stay within the 5-minute limit, and I thank you. This allows us to have more time for Q&A, which to me is the most interesting part of all discussions. Thank you to the audience for your questions. I think I just want to frame our discussions here with 2 points. Connectivity has endured as a concept and now as a strategy for decades. And the reason is that the logic of connecting economies, regions, and peoples is ineluctable. When we are connected, you will see growth, you will see enrichment, and you will see a exponential population of diversity. And that remains true today, even as there are anti-globalization forces in play. So connectivity is very much an asset for efforts to keep us bound together and to keep us working together for mutual prosperity, as the 4-3-2-1 plan has it. Secondly, I think connectivity is both a strategy as well as a tactic. And Anita has addressed it from the strategic point of view. And I think our 3 speakers from the EU have addressed various aspects and prongs of that strategy, and Ambassador Bin took on the regional take on both the strategy as well as the tactics. And now I'd like to kick off with a question from a fellow ACCC member, Ambassador, the permanent representative of Thailand. She has a simple question, which is code for something which is pretty difficult. And I'm going to throw this to all panelists. What, in your perspective, would be low-hanging fruits with speedy, practical, and sustainable outcome on digital innovation, which is one of the strategic areas in MPAC 2025? And all this within the context of the challenge of the COVID-19 pandemic. I'll just repeat it. What are the possible, from your perspective, what are the possible low-hanging fruits with a speedy, practical and sustainable outcome in the field of digital innovation? Would anyone like to start? Maybe Ambassador Bin? Ambassador Bin, okay.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for this question. I think it's quite intriguing, and as you said, it's quite difficult to answer thoroughly. But I think what we have seen over the past few months since the onset of COVID-19 pandemic, the use of technology, digital technology, video conferences have been on the rise. And we have seen that it has helped people stay connected, and businesses stay connected. I think that is a statement of how the development of technology in the region has helped businesses and people, stay together. That also underlines one important that, for example, here in Jakarta, many businesses can still survive, especially in the hospitality sector. They can still survive because of technology. Gojek, Grab, food is still being delivered, services, goods are still being delivered. So in that sense, it's innovation has helped, and what we can do next is to strengthen the regulatory framework, or in a way, it's to facilitate further development of technology-based companies. And that is also another point, is how we train, how we equip companies, or especially small and medium enterprises, or micro even, equip them with the technologies, with the knowledge, so that they can take advantage of technology and survive and thrive. So I think that is probably the most important thing that we can do as a region, which is of course part of the innovation. And I'm sure that once these very, very basic, very backbone elements or factors of our economies, SMEs can thrive, then the sustainable recovery or growth of regional economies on our individual economies will be achieved.
Thank you, Ambassador Bin. I think we can approach this topic from many aspects, and I think yes, regulatory frameworks definitely need to be strengthened. Would any of the panelists like to take this on? Just raise your hands, I can see. Yes, Asad, please go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Ambassador, and thank you for the question. I would say 3.5 billion people in the world are not digitally connected. That's a huge 45% or so. But looking at the numbers, if we increase internet penetration by 10%, potentially this can result in 2.5% increase in GDP. So potentially, if we invest in digital connectivity, this could generate for the globe $14 trillion, according to analysts and researchers. Specifically as regards low-hanging fruits, I would say e-commerce, e-health, and the e-economy, because I think we are continuing to work from home. Myself, Harvey, Jean-Louis, and also other colleagues, but some parts of the economy are not digitalized. So we have to be careful of not having a growing digital connectivity gap. So we need to invest now to try and reap benefits. Thank you.
Thank you, Asad. Anyone else of the panelists? Anita? Oh no, Jean-Louis, please.
Thank you, Ambassador. I won't be long because I think both speakers before me have framed quite substantially. Of course, I mean, just to repeat, and because I think it's quite key in our approach, I mean, from the EU point of view, digital technologies has allowed us to continue to work as we just demonstrate now. And this is great, I must say. I would never have imagined such a situation where we can meet without traveling, although I had some experience with videos, but I mean, at such a large scale, on a daily basis, 100% of what we do is done, and we are absolutely, as a commission, performing through digital. So that's great, but it also has some downsides. First, I mean, if we want to work as we do, we need definitely a secure digital environment. It's not something that we can use on let's say on an amatorial basis. Of course, there are challenges and risks, and that we definitely need to frame into a sound regulatory framework that protects societies. Cybersecurity is an issue. It needs to protect our economies to work, otherwise we will face difficulties and challenges. It needs also to guarantee personal data protections, rights and freedom online. So there's a vast range of issues where we should work, and we can work together. Second, as Asad just mentioned, I mean, there are plenty of people in the world that are not connected. So if we imagine a world where digital economy is, or digitalization is becoming the way of work, apart the fact that there are some physical activities that will need to be continued, we need to have a connection. And this is where also I think we should look into the risk of leaving some people behind. And of course, digital, in that sense, digital literacy with a particular attention to youth, perhaps women, rural population, minorities, or some, let's say, peripheral groups must be ensured, so that nobody is de facto excluded of this way of working. So quite important in our view, and also to achieve the SDG. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jean-Louis. And Anita, please.
Yes, thank you, Ambassador. Before the COVID pandemic, most of the policy conversation around digital connectivity was in an either-or format, that you move away from physical and move into digital connectivity. That is to say, both had different pathways and different regime. But the COVID-19, and this has come out in the ASEAN Economic Ministers' statement also, that if physical connectivities have to be resilient, then digital connectivity adds to that resiliency. So perhaps this is a time to not to see the two forms of connectivity with a firewall in between, that you leave physical and move on to digital. Now we are looking at a situation where digital actually helps in making physical connectivity resilient, or when the pathways of the physical connectivity are broken, then digital connectivity infuses this sort of resiliency into that connectivity. So this kind of a complementary outlook is now more important. I mean, this has become more obvious since the crisis. Yeah.
Thank you, Anita. You make a very good point there. And I think Javi has asked for the floor. Javi, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ambassador. Just a very quick point. I mean, as regards transport, of course, we are seeing ever more the digitalization of transport. It's both a challenge, it's also an opportunity. Jean-Louis mentions cybersecurity, of course, is a big problem. But what we see more and more in terms of the digitalization of transport is that transport, if you like, becomes mobility as a service. And therefore what we are seeing is, you know, we're all now talking through computers or mobile phones. That is becoming more and more an integral part also of transport. Plus, you will have, of course, in the future, I mean, I don't think this is necessarily a low-hanging fruit, but we will have intelligent, increasingly more intelligent transport systems. And we will have, for instance, automated and connected systems with cars and so forth. This will also have its advantages in terms of making mobility smarter, safer, greener. And that, I think, also applies in the post-COVID-19 world, where you know, people will want to know that they can use transport in a safe and secure manner, and certainly digitalization is going to assist in that. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I find that we are all in a bit of a paradox nowadays, because we're talking about connections that are physical, that are digital, and yet we're all staying home alone. But I suppose we'll be able to square the circle somehow. I have a few specific questions, but I'm going to generalize them. I'm going to pose two more questions because I'm conscious of the time. I'm just going to pose two more questions, and then I'd like to invite responses from panelists who want to respond. The first is, Anita's in the presentation already said that there are lots of linkages between our regions, EU and ASEAN. Javi is talking about adding one more piece to the puzzle, namely air links, and then in future, intelligent mobility, which I like the sound of. Now, where should we link up with? Because within each of our regions, it's no secret that we have various aspirants to be air hubs, sea hubs, maritime hubs, digital hubs, etc. So even as our regions cooperate with each other, we also have a healthy level of competition amongst ourselves. How do you see region-to-region connectivity proceeding? Would there be multiple sub-regional hubs, or would there only be sectoral champions from each region? Anyone is welcome to take this question, which came, by the way, from someone I think based in Vietnam. Show of hands, anyone? Okay. Anita, please. Anita, you have the floor. Your mic is off. Your mic is off.
Yes, a very intelligent and pertinent question, if I may say so. Air mobility is the sort of a litmus test of connectivity plans, regional connectivity plans passing through the hoop, so to speak. The EU-ASEAN CATA was mentioned earlier, and personally speaking, I'll be very happy to see this come through, because more and more as we move forward in bringing inter-regional partners together, then bilateralism is now giving way to trilateral relationships, and multilateral is even better. But in multilateral situation, getting the consensus is the toughest part. And this we have seen in the ASEAN-India Open Skies negotiations, which has not come through. And forget ASEAN-India, even within ASEAN, we have not seen the complete sort of a formulation of the policy. So, so when several freedoms remain pending, then air mobility, till that time, air mobility cannot be the kind of the flag bearer of interregional connectivity. Interregional connectivity will still have to fall back on the tried and tested grounds of integration through the value chains of production, that is to say the international production networks, and sort of vertical or horizontal connectivities. So that will still continue to remain your ultimate passing marks for a good connectivity, as to how closely you are integrated into the value chains with ASEAN or Asia, a larger Asian region. So air mobility would still not be able to crack the ultimate test of connectivity, given the competition between air hubs.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. That's a slightly pessimistic view, but I think that if you look at the data, it does support there has been a growing trend of air passengers and air freight as connectivity improves and as the cost of traveling by air drops. The pandemic has temporarily stopped this, but I'm personally quite confident that once people take to the skies, it is an insatiable appetite. And I know for a fact that our tourism sectors all depend on this, so I'd rather be a little more optimistic about that. And I think that we are capable of having multiple hubs. Would anyone else like to try their hand at this question? Javi, yes.
Yes,
Javi?
thank you very much, Ambassador. I think it would be slightly odd if I didn't take this question, considering it's very much on transport and on aviation. I think the first thing to say, of course, is that transport is growing. Aviation transport is growing at a phenomenal rate. If we take last year, more or less 4.5 billion people were flying. Now, I think we also need to realize that the impressive growth of aviation is putting a lot of pressure actually on air traffic management. So maybe we need to also turn this question around a little bit. It's not just, you know, whether some let's say airports are going to become massive hubs to the detriment of others. It's the management of the airspace also. If I take, for instance, the EU situation, the impact of capacity shortages by 2035 is estimated at 1.5 million flights not accommodated. So that would be 160 million passengers unable to fly if there are not improvements in air traffic management and we take into account the growth that is predicted. Now that would result in, and as you say, Ambassador, it's very important for the industry, for tourism and so forth, it would result in a potential loss of 800,000 jobs and an annual loss of 50 billion euros of GDP to the EU. And yes, the EU skies are incredibly busy, but they're also getting increasingly busy, I would say, in the ASEAN region too. So I would like to maybe turn it around, the question a little bit. And in terms of connectivity, one of the areas that we need to work on together, and our skies do not have borders as such in terms of this, we need to work together on air traffic management together. We are working hard on this through actually looking at the efficiency of the airspace. And this has also a very good positive impact in that we've all been in planes going round and round in the sky above airports waiting to land, and they are using, of course, fuel. It's not good for the environment. So the more efficiency that we can have in the airspace, the better we can manage it, and then also we can, let's say, address these very likely capacity issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Harvey. You're my best friend now. ASEAN is doing a lot in terms of airspace and air services and air rights within ASEAN and also with our dialogue partners. And I'm personally very excited for Qatar, and I'm hoping that we can conclude this as soon as possible. I saw an earlier question, and this is going to be our last question. Again, it's going to be open to the panel. I saw a question about the possibility of our regions working together on the subject of energy. And I'd like to bring this in with the constant theme of sustainability. I mentioned earlier that ASEAN is very much a carbon-based region, although we are looking at renewable energy as far as possible. And the EU has revealed its green platform. So how do you think we can find a way to work together under the connectivity rubric? I'm going to check if Ambassador Bin, you want to maybe say a few words about this? If you do, please unmute your mic and then we can take it up. Or meanwhile, I would like, yes, okay, please, Ambassador.
I'm sorry, what's the question? I'm sorry, I got carried away just with something. Yeah.
No worries, no worries. The question is, how can ASEAN and EU work together on energy under the rubric of connectivity, given that our ASEAN region is still carbon-based, largely carbon-based, although we're looking at ways to move into RE and sustainable development. And the EU has unveiled a very ambitious green plan. So would you care to share your thoughts, Ambassador Bin?
This is a difficult question, to be honest, because I think within ASEAN, you know, we are still you know, looking at you know, various issues in energy, from you know, the sources of energy, how we developed you know, the energy market, which is envisioned as integrated. So I think, to be honest, I think this is an issue which is quite interesting, but perhaps I don't have an answer, you know, for the time being, because obviously it is something we need to sort out among ourselves first before, you know, even anything that is about energy connectivity is you know, beyond the region is to be developed. So I'm sorry, I don't have an answer. Sorry.
No, it's a fair point that this is a very large and a very difficult question to tackle. I think that we have to start the conversation And now that we are actively pursuing connectivity between ASEAN and EU, this perhaps is one of the areas that we can have a more in-depth dialogue about soon. Would any other panelists like to take up this question? Jean-Louis, please, you have the floor. And after that, Asad. Please, Jean-Louis.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador. I think we have a common agenda. I mean, let's start from there, right? I don't want to make a long speech. We have a Paris Agreement, and this is why the EU has positioned itself with an ambitious agenda to reach and to try to match the commitments that we've taken. ASEAN is very much on our side on this, although we know the challenges. You are a carbon-oriented region, not a criticism, just a matter of fact, and you have an increasing needs in terms of energy that needs to be produced to sustain your growth. So these are the very simplistic parameters of the equations. Now, I think we have been investing in terms of thoughts, of corporations and little money in the region, like what we do in Vietnam, for instance, to support the energy mix, policy mix that the Vietnamese government is trying to put in place. So this is how we can certainly look at various energy policies at local level. And of course, every country is different. But taking that into account, I mean, we can help in setting standards. And I've mentioned in my intervention the ACGF, these ASEAN Connectivity Global Funds. This is where we can drive and attract investment into a specific sector through our support. And I think energy could be a good example of that, where we could try to attract more public and private investment into the energy sector, so that the transition from the carbon-based energy production in the region moves into a more, let's say, environmental friendly type of production, be it renewable, be it water, be it or energy efficiency perhaps. So there are a lot of things that we can perhaps, of course, it will not change dramatically from one to the other. And we know that because we also experience the same challenge in our transitions to the green, let's say, to the 2050 normally carbon neutral society we're aiming at. So, but clearly, this is a field where we can definitely work together, have a further dialogue, as you suggested, Ambassador. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think all our panelists want to speak on this point. So I'm going to give the floor to Asad now. Asad, and then Javi next. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. And thank you to the questioner Benny Suryadi, I understand. As mentioned, I think we have the Green Deal, which is a key priority for the EU. And that's also helping others moving towards a low green and clean transition. I would say, just looking at the statistics, since the year 2000, Southeast Asia has increased its energy demand by 80%. I see that some researchers have predicted that by 2040, the energy trade deficit could rise to $300 billion US. So ASEAN region could be a net importer of fossil fuels. So maybe three areas where we could look at is the EU sharing its experience of the Green Deal, on efficient regional and global energy markets. I know that there is a dialogue. Our colleagues from DG ENER from the Commission, I think, are in touch with the counterparts. Another area, as mentioned by Jean-Louis, is investing and getting the private sector on board. I know that we've had, under the Juncker Fund and the Juncker Plan, we have put in 33 billion euros and generated 500 billion, which is a factor of 15. So I think investing in clean energy would be a good one. It's not going to be easy, but we have to start, as Javi said, step by step. And then the last thing, I think it's maybe looking at research and development and sharing best practice and some of the things that were mentioned, like smart cities, Internet of Things, e-commerce, and the importance of having more efficiency in our existing energy systems. So regulation, investment, and them being maybe more joined up. Thank you.
Thank you, Asad. I think you've identified three very good areas, and I would be remiss if I didn't put in a plug for three ASEAN centers. It could be possible partners. First, ASEAN Center for Energy, which is based here in Jakarta, doing a lot of good work, both in traditional and new sources of energy. Second is the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity, which is based in the Philippines. What is the link between biodiversity and energy? Well, you never know when your next fuel cell is going to come from. And the third is our new ASEAN Center for Sustainable Development, which is based in Thailand. That was set up with the express mandate to look at ways that ASEAN countries can continue to grow in a sustainable and green manner. And well, they've already reached out to the EU and they've held 3 dialogues, I think, now on sustainable development. So yes, but I've done my bit for ASEAN. And now, Harvey, what would you like to add to this conversation?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ambassador. I mean, decarbonization, of course, is one of the main challenges of the transport sector. Transport is essential for our economies, of course, but it accounts, if I take the EU, for example, it accounts for 1/4 of our greenhouse gas emissions, and these continue to grow. So if we look at the different transport modes, the biggest polluter by far in the EU, and I imagine in ASEAN also, of the transport sector is road. It accounts for over 70% of total emissions. And then you have actually sea and inland transport, and then you have aviation and then railways. Now, although aviation sector is the 3rd biggest polluter in terms of global house emissions, it is almost doubled actually its carbon footprint since 1990. So transport does actually risk being the biggest emitter of CO2 emissions by 2030 if no policy measures are taken. And that's why in the European Green Deal, which has been mentioned, which was adopted back in December, it includes a specific target for transport. And that is that we seek to achieve a 90% reduction in transport emissions by 2050. And our goal really, therefore, is to create a more efficient and sustainable transport system. I think it was Churchill who famously said that difficulties mastered are opportunities won. And there we must see this, it's going to be difficult, but we must see it as an opportunity. And there are multiple ways of achieving this goal. For instance, through increased use of alternative fuels. And there we could definitely work with partners. Certainly in Asia, many Asian countries are very advanced on looking at alternative fuels, and we could work more with ASEAN there. Price signals, so internalizing costs through road charging, for instance. Technical and digital solutions and innovations. We discussed this a bit earlier in terms of digitalization. And then promoting a sort of multimodality, if you like, so shift to lower emission modes, especially rail and inland waterway transport. So we've been putting an emphasis very much, as I mentioned, on alternative fuels for all transport modes. And we're developing policies on this and incentivizing them. Even going back to 2014, we already passed legislation on this in terms of electric vehicles, hydrogen, liquid natural gas, and across the board, you know, in terms of maritime, aviation, and of course road. And there, I think, in terms of alternative fuels, it's something definitely that we could work together with ASEAN on in the future. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Harvey. Anita, do you want to add? You need to unmute, Anita.
Yes, thank you, Ambassador. I just wanted to quickly point out that finding a common ground between EU and ASEAN in terms of energy connectivity is because EU is quite ahead in achieving its stated goals. ASEAN is has still got a lot of concentration on renewables still. Coal is also very much on offer, although clean coal technology is something which ASEAN can do well with. But in terms of renewable, it's the penetration of renewables that ASEAN really requires. But then, while it is not a highly technical field of work, it is capital intensive work. So finding the funds for penetration of renewables is a huge challenge, which any and every dialogue partner of ASEAN, including the EU, will have to clearly look at when contemplating connectivity around energy. And the future alternative sources, the hydrogen is something on which ASEAN has been looking at very closely, although it is still not on the main table, but a lot of research is being provided to ASEAN on that. And that is something where EU can also come in sort of quickly and fill a it's a small gap, but it's a major one for the future. So yeah, from a funding perspective, the penetration of renewables, and from alternative perspective, hydrogen and as a source of energy, these are two things which EU-ASEAN energy connectivity can look into.
Thank you very much, Anita. Thank you very much to all my panelists for your very energetic and informative presentations, as well as your answers to the questions posed to the panel. I would like to wrap up our session now. I would like to thank everyone for their patience with the connection issues. Ironic, but there you go. Also to thank everyone for your questions. And I would like to leave you with this point. It's taken a while for ASEAN and EU to get to this stage of discussing our formal cooperation on connectivity. But I'm glad that we're here today. Zuchin's panel, which will take place immediately after this, is going to go into the technicalities and the specifics. But here in this panel, I hope that everyone goes away with the understanding that connectivity is both a fact of life and also a political construct, which ASEAN wants to populate in all of our dialogue partnerships, in all of our relationships with our partners. We in ASEAN are keenly aware that our region's continued prosperity and growth depends upon our collaboration with our friends. And therefore, we're very glad that we have started this conversation with the EU, and we hope to take it further as the year progresses. Thank you all for your time. Thank you all for your contributions. And I wish everybody a very nice day. Thank you. Bye-bye. Vicky, back to you.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the moderator, Ambassador Kok Lee Peng, and all the speakers for the very enriching discussion. We hope you have enjoyed the first panel and have taken some interesting insights from it. Before we go into the break, we would like to invite you to a 2-minute video the EU has prepared. This is about its project supporting connectivity between the EU and ASEAN, and also within ASEAN.
In today's globalized world, people, economies, and financial systems are connected like never before. This connectivity is essential to address today's urgent global challenges. The EU supports connectivity both among ASEAN member states and between the EU and ASEAN regions. Connectivity that is sustainable, comprehensive, and rules-based. The EU strengthens connectivity through the networks, dialogues, and exchanges that link the EU and ASEAN. The EU supports economic connectivity that facilitates trade and supports global trading standards. That builds bilateral free trade agreements with ASEAN member states as stages towards a region-to-region agreement. The EU-ASEAN Comprehensive Air Transport Agreement will be the first region-to-region agreement covering safety, security, and air traffic management. In line with the European Green Deal, the EU also supports green infrastructure investment in ASEAN. The EU puts people first, building connectivity to enhance education, research and innovation, as well as culture and tourism. Connectivity is at the heart of everything that EU does. We aim to build a stronger EU, a stronger ASEAN, and a stronger partnership so everyone benefits.
Thank you everyone for your attention. We will have a quick break now. Please keep your Zoom connected and get back to your seat at 3:50 p.m. Jakarta time or 10:50 a.m. Brussels time for the second panel. Thank you.
Good afternoon and good morning, Excellencies, friends, and participants. Welcome to the second panel on sustainable infrastructure investment in ASEAN. I am Lim Tzu-Jin, Director for ASEAN Connectivity at the ASEAN Secretariat, and I will be your moderator for this session. Before we start, please mute your microphone during the session and send your questions through the chat function. In session 1, we hear that connectivity means different things to different stakeholders. It can be physical infrastructure, it can be digital infrastructure, it can be institutional arrangements, it can be people-to-people linkages. What matters more is connectivity builds linkages, creates networks, and forge partnership for our peoples. This session, we will focus on sustainable infrastructure investment. Sustainable infrastructure is key to connectivity and to building a cohesive, responsive, and resilient ASEAN community through a natural partnership with the EU. Last year, ASEAN has launched an initial pipeline of infrastructure projects, and we are now working on an infrastructure productivity framework and implementing the ASEAN Sustainable Urbanization Strategy and the ASEAN Smart Cities Network. We have a fantastic panel joining us today to discuss sustainable infrastructure investment in ASEAN. We will start with 3 short presentations, followed by panel discussions. We have with us Ms. Caroline Wellman, Deputy Head of Unit, Sustainable Finance at the Directorate General for Financial Stability, Financial Services, and Capital Markets Union, or DG FISMA. Mr. Chris Humphrey, Executive Director, EU ASEAN Business Council. Mr. Johan de Villiers, Country Managing Director, ABB Singapore. Mr. Evadas Boomsteiners, Head of Asia and Pacific Division, European Investment Bank. Mr. Anuj Mehta, Unit Head, Green and Innovative Finance, and the ASEAN Catalytic Green Finance Facility, Asian Development Bank. And Mr. Mark Giblert, Senior Infrastructure Finance Specialist, the World Bank. Making sustainable infrastructure happen requires sustainable financing. To elaborate further, let me invite Ms. Caroline Wellman to make a presentation on international platform for sustainable finance. Caroline, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chin. So indeed, I'm responsible for developing sustainable finance initiative within the EU, but also for the international aspect of sustainable finance. And I'm very delighted to be here today and invited to this seminar, because sustainable finance will play a key role in ensuring a green recovery post-COVID-19 crisis, and it is essential to mobilize the capital needed towards high-quality infrastructure investment at the speed and at the scale required to meet a Paris Agreement objective and of our SDGs objective. So I will start my presentation by give you a bit of context. I can move to slide 2. Oops. So, yep. Sorry, slide 2. So here it is. So it's here. Okay, thank you so much. So just after it took office in December, the European Commission, under the presidency of Ursula von der Leyen, committed to make the EU the first climate neutral continent by 2050. And to achieve this very ambitious target, the European Commission adopted a new sustainable growth strategy, the European Green Deal. It has been referred to already during the first panel. The European Green Deal is a roadmap, a blueprint to, on the one hand, transform the EU into a fair, prosperous society with a resource-efficient and competitive economy, but it is also, on the other hand, to work together with our partners to implement and promote ambitious climate, environmental, and energy policies. But very unfortunately, since the adoption of the European Green Deal last December, the world has been facing one of the most destructive crises it has ever to face due to the COVID-19 pandemic crisis. And while the COVID-19 pandemic crisis is indisputably the most imminent threat to humanity, we should not forget that climate change is the biggest threat to humanity over the long run. So COVID-19 has also very clearly underlined the close link between human activity, environmental degradation, and human health, earth health, and planet health. So our efforts and our action to fight climate change and environmental degradation have become important more than ever. And the European Commission is very committed to place the European Green Deal at the center of its recovery plan. The European Green Deal will be the motor of our recovery. As President Ursula von der Leyen said, we will sooner or later find a vaccine to fight the COVID-19, but we will not find a vaccine to fight against climate change. We need a plan and we need to act together. And this is why our aim is not to return to pre-crisis state, but on the contrary, to build back better in a manner that it is consistent with long-term sustainability, focusing on green, resilient, and equitable recovery. And amongst the package, you may have heard that we have proposed a global EU response via Team Europe to support our partner against the spread and to mitigate also the economic and social consequences of the COVID-19. And in this context, the EU is mobilizing 350 million to Asian countries. Okay, the post-COVID economic recovery And the transition towards a low carbon economy, towards a sustainable economy, must go hand in hand at EU level and at global level. The global economy is entering into a recession, and the recovery will require very likely unprecedented scale of investment, leading to high level of national debt and putting a very heavy burden on the next generation. And this is why investment must be recouped by later savings, by sustainable growth, by sustainable job creation, in order to give youth a fighting chance. At the end of the day, there is also a question of intergenerational solidarity. And this seminar and this panel is very important because infrastructure sits at the very center of development pathways, underpinned economic growth, productivity, well-being, and investment in sustainable infrastructure are very key to ensure a green recovery. The public sector will have a key role to play to catalyzing high-quality infrastructure investment, that it is needed to stimulate economic growth and create durable job opportunities after the crisis. Already in 2017, the OECD estimates an annual infrastructure investment gap of 6.9 trillion between 2015 and 2013, and this was an estimate before the crisis. So the scale of the infrastructure investment gap calls for diversified sources of financing, domestic and international, but also public and private. It also requires that we are developing a stronger pipeline of sustainable projects. And to better align international financial flows towards environmentally sustainable project, there is a need to strengthening three pillars. First, a supply of finance. So not only public finance, but also blended finance provide incentive to mobilize the private sector by de-risking sustainable investment, by de-risking operations. We need also to provide the right enabling frameworks, the right tools to identify sustainable investment, sustainable infrastructure. And in this context, sustainable finance tools play a key role and can help a lot. And we also need to develop technical assistance, provide technical assistance to help develop a strong pipeline of projects, to help identify, structure, and execute sustainable projects. And in light of this tremendous amount of investment needs, sustainable finance has become over the last years a key topic and a key priority also for the Commission. A clear success in this regard was the adoption in 2018 of the EU Action Plan on Sustainable Finance. And the action plan aims to mobilize investors towards green investment opportunities. But in light of the new ambition under the European Green Deal, and in light also of the ambition to make this recovery green, we are working now in the Commission towards a renewed sustainable finance strategy, which will be adopted by the end of the year. For the moment, we have launched a public consultation until mid of July. So all your comments, all your input would be more than welcome. And we will take it into consideration in preparing our next strategy. But of course, we also need to cooperate all together on sustainable finance. Financial markets are global and can help all countries on the transition path by linking global sources of funding to local needs. But this potential is however, largely untapped. To mobilize international investors and to scale up cross-border green investment, we really need to promote integrated market for environmentally sustainable finance. Indeed, many countries are developing their own sustainable finance initiative, and this is excellent. Amongst those, we have China, Canada, UK, but we have also Asian countries that are developing a sustainable finance initiative, like Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, to name only a few of them. But this is to say that it is the right moment, the right time to work together, to develop coordinated approach, to develop coherent frameworks and standards, because greater international alignment between this sustainable finance initiative and tools standard for environmentally sustainable investment, as well as mutual recognition of the classification system for sustainable investment, will definitively facilitate cross-border private capital flow into green projects and reduce transaction costs. So it is important that we start to talk the same language when we talk about green investment across the globe to facilitate cross-border investment. And this is the reason why the European Union, together with relevant public authorities of Argentina, Canada, Chile, China, India, Kenya, and Morocco, launched last October the International Platform on Sustainable Finance. And since then, since last October, we are delighted to inform that other countries have joined, notably Indonesia, Singapore, New Zealand, Norway, and Switzerland. The IPSF, the International Platform on Sustainable Finance, offers a multilateral forum of dialogue between public authorities that are responsible to develop sustainable finance. And it is important because it will help investors identify and seize sustainable investment opportunity that truly contribute to climate and environmental objectives. Then next slide. Thank you. So the main objective of the IPSF is to promote integrated market with a view to scale up the mobilization of the private capital towards environmentally sustainable finance at global level. And to achieve this objective, members have agreed to exchange and disseminate information to promote best practices, and also to compare the different initiatives and identify barriers and opportunities. And for those who are willing, for those members who are willing to advance further, they can also strive to align initiatives and approach. And the work we are doing under the IPSF will be fundamental because they prepare the ground for international standards setter in developing globally applicable sustainable finance standard. Okay, then thank you. So the main focus area of the International Platform on Sustainable Finance are taxonomies, so the classification of sustainable economic activity, but also standards and labels such as Green Bond Standard and disclosure of sustainability information. So as I said, the IPSF is open to public authority which are taking action and willing to promote international cooperation in the area of environmentally sustainable finance. We are very happy and delighted to work already with Singapore and Indonesia under the IPSF, and we would welcome more other Asian countries to join the platform and to work together with us, because together we can make a difference, because together by coordinated our efforts and our tools, we will be better equipped to face the most important transition of our times. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline, for sharing with us the EU strategies on sustainable finance, including the European Green Deal, and highlighting the 3 pillars of supply of finance, right enabling framework, and technical assistance. I'm glad to hear that Indonesia and Singapore is already part of the international platform on sustainable finance. hope to see more ASEAN member states benefit from such a platform. So I will now turn to Edvardas to present on the European Investment Bank support to connectivity. Edvardas, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lim Chen, and it was very interesting to be part of today's morning session, where a lot of pertinent points were addressed and discussed, and also with big interest I followed the presentation that was made now by my colleague from the European Union. And I will focus more on let's say, the banking aspects of connectivity, in particular on ASEAN connectivity. And I initially was not intending to make a presentation, but as this morning we experienced some audibility issues, I asked to have a slide, and probably I will not use many, just maybe one or two. So if possible, if we could have my first slide on the screen. Yes, this is the one. Great. So, you know, this is basically the setting and the main pillars I would like to focus on today in this short time that is allocated for my presentation. The first pillar is of EIB's activity is fundamentally strong alignment with the EU external policies. The reason for this is that the European Investment Bank is the bank of the European Union member states, and we also have the European Commission on our board. So all the projects they do follow the EU priorities. And just before in the first session, the Green Deal was mentioned, and some discussion took place around it. And in fact, EIB has made a significant commitment to support and promote the Green Deal as the EU's climate bank. We have committed to mobilize a total of 1 trillion euros in the next decade for climate and energy, green energy financing. And that's rather significant. And knowing that EIB traditionally has been financing about, well, we can stay with the slide as we were with the previous slide. I see we switched to the ACGF, which is also relevant. But yeah, just the initial slide that you showed. Thank you. We don't need to skip slides. I'll focus just on the previous slide. If we could go to, yeah, this one. Let's not move. I don't have a lot of time. So we just stick with this slide, please. So the EIB is, as I mentioned, aligning with the EU external policies, and we also, because of that, the connectivity is yet another significant area of priority, in particular for EU and Asia relationships. Now, in our funding, in appraising projects where we pay significant attention is transparency in procurement and international standards. Ultimately, this benefits the final beneficiaries and the countries which are implementing projects, but also, I would say, the suppliers, European suppliers, and also ASEAN suppliers, who do get an opportunity, a reasonable chance to participate in those international tenders, in those bids. but also what is very important, because we promote international standards in our project for projects that link directly to connectivity between different countries. For example, we are now analyzing proposals related to Lao in interconnectivity, electricity, transmission lines, etc., between different countries in the region. That's where I think EIB brings a lot of value, because our standards, they do promote those type of projects that we are seeking to support and discuss now in this forum. One other aspect that is very important for a number of ASEAN countries is debt sustainability. And when we appraise our projects, we again emphasize the debt sustainability, and that's where the blending instruments such as the IFE can play a significant role. So I would say it's, as a previous speaker mentioned, it is about also de-risking projects and allowing private capital to come in, but at the same time is making projects viable to start with. In many cases, blending is extremely important. And EIB is also reliant a lot on these external mandates, because outside of Europe, we do rely on the external lending mandate, and now what is going to be the future NDC mandate, and that's going to be negotiated in the next MFF post-2020 context. And I think, my suggestion to this forum is to seek for a significant or a meaningful, at least, allocation from NDC to Asia, and ASEAN in particular, because without that EU budgetary support allocated in the multi-annual financial framework context, it will be difficult for institutions like EIB, but also for others to de-risk projects and to promote also private sector involvement in those projects. Last point, what I wanted to say is the importance of cooperation. And I think that's where ASEAN is already playing a role, and I'm talking about ASEAN Secretariat and different working groups like this one, but that's where we should continue building on. About 50% of all our EIB projects in Asia are financed in cooperation with ADB, the Asia Development Bank. The other 50% financed with other partners, for example, IFAD. We have done a beautiful project with IFAD in Cambodia just last year. Rural roads, also some connectivity project, and we have a big pipeline of more projects. So that's where we can join forces with international organizations as well. Then also European financial institutions like FD, KfW. We are financing with them projects in not only in ASEAN, for example, in Pakistan, hydropower plants, but also in ASEAN countries like Vietnam, metros and other projects. So I know that my time now has expired, so I try to focus just on this one slide in order to cover at least the key elements. And obviously there are many more topics that one would want to expand on. And I'm very happy maybe to take this either during Q&A or offline. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Edvardas, for sharing with us EIB's cooperation and activities. I'm particularly drawn to your comment on the 2021 and 2027 EU multi-annual financial framework. I do hope to see that the ASEAN envelope will grow in that particular framework and programming period. So may I now invite Anuj from ADB to speak on the ASEAN Catalytic Green Finance Facility. Anuj, the floor is yours.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Director Lim. I hope you can hear me and see me.
Perfect.
And lovely. And luckily, I only have one slide, so there won't be too much of a technical mishap to do anything with this. So, I'll give a very, very quick overview of this. Just as a very quick context setting, within the Asian Development Bank, there was already a team which was working and basically administering a fund which is called the ASEAN Infrastructure Fund, the AIF, which was set up about 2012. It is perhaps the only regional financing platform which is owned by each of the countries in the region. This is the ASEAN region, jointly with ADB, and it's been managed by ADB since 2012. Now, about a year and a half ago, 2018 really, we started working on the concept of making it, the ASEAN's green finance platform. And this was trying to link into, 2 or 3 key challenges. So before I come into, the ACGF itself, the challenges are important. And those challenges are, I think, threefold. Lack of understanding in terms of what is sustainable infrastructure, which we define as green in our case. Lack of ability of projects to be developed as bankable projects, especially when we're talking about large-scale connectivity infrastructure projects. And the third is the very high level of risk perception by the private sector, which is stopping money flowing in. And therefore, if I had to put, sort of a story around the creation of ACGF, it's all about the flow of capital from private sector into projects that we want to leverage, and the issue of risk perception. So if I go over to the next slide, what we've done, along with the perhaps go one slide more, is the creation of ACGF, which was launched in April last year with all the ASEAN finance ministers, and then operationalization started around October last year. And it's trying to put together a number of enablers to really catalyze this pipeline of, everybody talks about it, the pipeline of green bankable projects, which is missing. And if you talk about connectivity, it's really missing. It's not so much about developing, one road or 2 roads. It's about developing public transport systems which can effectively measure green indicators and catalyze in private capital. And that's just not happening at the scale required. And it's actually just got a lot worse in the last 4 months with the COVID effect. So the finances, which were already 50 to 60% was the gap in financing infrastructure, climate adjusted infrastructure, is probably much worse now, because the public sector is obviously using its money for other immediate relief operations, and private sector risk perception just went up, a huge amount. So the ACGF was created, a year and a half ago, but is extremely well placed to deal with these issues now. And it's combining a number of things over there. So I had put this down as enablers, which is developing projects. And there's a lot of talk about creating PDFs to do projects, but what is a proper project? It's not just about technical, it's about the financial structuring. That's what ACGF does. We've got a TA for that. We've got 17 projects we're already working on now. Number 2 is governance, still under enablers. So where are the utility structures with good credit ratings which could do a bond? Do they really exist at the scale required? Certainly not. We have under the ACGF the TA, which can be used to prepare bonds at SOEs, local governments. We are trying to do that now. Number 2 is instruments. So there is a whole plethora of instruments. I've mentioned a few over here, which could be used: investment trusts, green bonds. And these are examples which exist in the market. What we've tried to do in ACGF is move on a gradual basis. So we've created a de-risking instrument under ACGF. The funds will be used to de-risk projects. At the moment, it is what we call a 2-step loan. So it is relatively cheap in the first 7 years, the highest risk period. And then the price goes up in year 8, which is intended for the ACGF money to get refinanced out by the private sector. We've taken the risk, construction is over, ACGF is not needed anymore. Great, let's revolve it out. So that, but we've also got a roadmap to try and develop further support from ACGF for guaranteeing green bonds, for developing first loss structures. So that is going to come later, but we are working on the simplest instrument at the moment. Last thing perhaps is in terms of the the regional aspect. And I think this is so critical. Yesterday we had the board meeting for the ASEAN Infra Fund, where we reviewed the progress of what the ACGF has done to date. Mind you, ACGF has only been operationalized since October last year, but it was very heartening to be able to show 17 projects, 6 of which are basically going in for the AIF board approval already this year, maybe 1 year ahead of schedule. And the impact is startling. Just with these projects, we already see a 6 to 8 times multiple being leveraged in from, that means for every dollar of ACGF money, we already estimate 6 times financing plus coming in from a mixture of other climate donors, plus from the private sector. That's what we are structuring in these 6 projects. We also see the greenhouse gas emissions, which is calculated for every single project, being extremely large. So the projects include, of course, regional transport. It includes urban sector as well as energy. So just in this short period, we already see a huge impact, and even more importantly, a huge demand, especially for structuring projects. And we are extremely excited that this has been hugely supported by both the European Investment Bank. EIB was actually the first institution to come forward and actually tell us that they will actually support ACGF maybe a year and a half ago with a commitment of, I think, 150 million euros. And the European Union itself, which has been extremely strong in all the discussions last year to provide support for the ACGF. So it's now receiving a lot of interest from other donors who want to come into the ACGF. And I think the work is there, and I think our positioning is very strong with both de-risking money as well as with grant money to develop projects. So I'll leave it there, Director Lim, and hand back to you and maybe take more questions later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anuj, for sharing with us the progress that we made with the ASEAN Catalytic Green Finance Facility. I guess in the longer term, COVID-19 does basically show that we need to demand for more sustainable, more resilient infrastructure as we move forward. So short term, we may have some challenges, but in the longer term, I guess the demand is still there. Let me also say that since ASEAN has developed an initial pipeline of infrastructure projects, so we do hope that there will be some synergy between the ASEAN pipeline as well as the ACGF that you are managing at this moment. So hopefully in the future, we'll see that synergy played out.
Sure, look forward to that.
All right, so let me now move to the panel discussions. So I will ask a few rounds of questions, and the panelists will provide their answers in a short and crisp manner. So let me start the ball rolling with the first question on projects. So we often hear the importance of creating a strong pipeline of bankable projects and find innovative ways to direct capital efficiently to the most promising projects. So what infrastructure sectors present the best opportunity for the private sectors in ASEAN at this moment? So maybe I will ask the private sector first. So I will call Chris Humphrey first, and then followed by Johan. And then after that, we will go to Edvardas and Anuj, and then Mark. All right, so Chris, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Director Lim. Very nice to be here, and good afternoon to all the excellencies, or good morning if you're in Europe still. Yes, what sort of infrastructure project would the private sector be happy to finance? I think first thing to note in all of this is there is an absolute need to get the private sector involved in the development of infrastructure in ASEAN. The governments of the region couldn't afford it, or couldn't afford everything before COVID-19, and certainly can't afford it now after sinking lots of money in for economic stimulus packages. So there's an absolute need to get the private sector involved in financing projects across the region. The very short, simple answer is any infrastructure project where the private sector can earn a reasonable rate of return on their investment, because they are not going to do this for altruistic reasons. They will want to make money out of it. And there are many things I think that ASEAN can do collectively and as individual countries to help make sure that there is a bigger pipeline of bankable projects. And they are things around such as perhaps having an ASEAN-wide taxonomy, if you're talking about sustainable finance. So one set of rules and guidance across the region that will help them use funds more easily from right across the region and from externally as well. A set of ESG standards, environmental, social and governance standards as well, would also help the private sector, because that's going to increase the pool of funds that will then be available from the private banking and financial institutions community. Another one would be access to long-term investment funds. So many countries in the region do not allow insurance companies to invest their money in infrastructure projects, even though they're sitting on large amounts of money which need to be invested over long periods of time, and infrastructure is a very long-term investment. And I think there are other things as well. We need to make sure that when we're looking at infrastructure and trying to assess its bankability, it's a fantastic word, we need to look at it for the whole life of the project. It's not just the construction period, it's the entire operation period, and even then the decommissioning period at the end of it, even though that may be 30 or 40 years away in some cases. And ensuring value for money, and that doesn't mean the cheapest. It doesn't mean the cheapest bid. It means the one that delivers the quality that's needed for the infrastructure at the right price as well. And I think my final point really would be, we're talking about sustainable financing. Sustainability, of course, is not just green. The UN SDGs cover a whole bunch of other things, which in many cases may be more important in this region, such as removing inequalities, access to quality education, clean water, etc., etc. So yeah, to answer your question, there's a whole bunch of projects out there I think the private sector would be interested in. The European private sector certainly would be interested in. But the key, I think, really is getting the basics right around where the money can come from, increasing the access to different funding streams, and making sure, I think, that some of the regulations that will support it are all in place as well.
Thanks, Chris. Johan, please.
Good day, everyone, and thanks, Director. Chris gave a very comprehensive answer, and we're in full alignment there. What we see, or maybe just for context, ABB is a technology provider, and we're involved in a variety of different infrastructure projects. We have a large footprint in ASEAN, so not just involved in the infrastructure projects, but also reliant on infrastructure to operate efficiently here. And we don't get involved with the financing aspect. But what we see, there are some sectors which very naturally lends itself towards private sector investment. And if you look at the whole space of digitalization and communication, you know, there's good traction. You see strong investments there. I think if you just look at Myanmar phone adoption, smartphone adoption, and the impact that that has, and how that unlocks value and possibilities for industry to thrive, great examples of that. And that'll just get stronger and stronger. I think another area where we naturally see a lot of private sector investment is e-mobility. So rolling out charging infrastructure, not just for public, you know, buses and cars, but also in ports, at airports, and, you know, places where there's captive mobility and where we can start to have better solutions there with electrical power. And then other areas are quite difficult to attract private sector funding, especially those that are addressing social needs. You know, if you have to put rail infrastructure into a congested city center, it's much more difficult to make the calculation, the payback. So I think there we need a lot of collaborative discussions and ways to mitigate the risk. You know, so in general, I'd say wherever you find a good business case, solving real problems, strong value proposition, acceptable risk, those are obviously things that attract the private sector. And maybe just to add to that, I think just want to strongly agree with Chris. I think this ESG framework is a great way to think about projects. And, you know, we're also as a company, you know, looking at and screening carefully the projects that we get involved with. And it's not just for environment, you know, but absolutely for governance, making sure we can do this safely, we can deploy our staff without harming us and our contractors. that there's strong rules around corruption and bribery. And, you know, when you're in the early phases of developing a country, those are big challenges. But I think that's where European companies can set high standards. And really, we've seen that where we've been active and operating, transform the way business is done, which it brings a great positive value as well.
Thank you very much, Johan. I'll move to Evadas.
Thank you. I very much subscribe to the view that we need to ensure that private capital is mobilized for the projects related to connectivity and beyond. In fact, when you look at connectivity in particular, the role of private sector is very significant because connectivity has so many dimensions. One of them is digital. So we are talking about high technologies, and we are talking about telecommunications. That's where private sector traditionally has been very strong. What is sometimes needed is the infrastructure to support it and enabling environment. So that's why in my presentation, I mentioned the importance of partnerships. ACGF, where we just had a very interesting presentation from Anuj Mehta. You know, that's the type of enabling platforms that we need, and the role of the IB is to support such platforms when we can. I think also that we should not, of course, underestimate the continuing role of the public sector and the need to promote transparency in the public sector, to promote international standards in public sector, because if we don't have those fundamentals, those enablers, as one of the speakers said, then the other components they will simply not hold together, and then we will not be able to achieve the ultimate goals that we want. So I'm a strong supporter of partnerships and of those platforms. And the Green Deal, which was mentioned a number of times, it is in fact a huge partnership. It is a partnership of the European Union, of MDBs, of national governments, and of private participants, private investors, companies, suppliers. So we need an ecosystem that will enable us to achieve our goals. Thank you.
Thank you. Anuj?
Thanks, Direct Lim. Yeah, I think, you know, sort of in the same vein, I'll probably just add to that, which is, you know, I draw a distinction. Private sector, you know, is always there in infrastructure in the region, you know, as long as they're, you know, obviously going to get paid for it. Now that is contracting, but I guess what we are talking about is how do you attract private sector with finance for CapEx, because that's the whole issue. And, you know, private sector can either be through the PPP route, which is, you know, got its own challenges. And of course, it's, you know, through institutional investors. So, you know, two very different mindsets with two different perceptions of risk from these things, from these different segments of the private sector. And, you know, so very naturally, it comes down to the underlying projects. And what we're seeing is the energy sector, especially renewable energy, where there are very clear power purchase agreements and where the risk of revenue and offtake is really between one entity, the government, for example, and the private sector, is where a lot more investment is going today than in other sectors which desperately need it, which is mass transit and water and sanitation, because there you've got so much more exposure to revenue. And therefore, those sectors and those projects within this where money will flow better will either be where there is a pooled vehicle, and so the private investors are diversified in terms of risk, not a single project. And so you see these pooled vehicles. There's an example in China, Shandong, which was set up a year ago, Green Fund, or where there are revenue guarantees or government guarantees on an ADB guarantee behind a project. Those would be the projects and sectors where private investments or private strategic investments would flow. Thank you.
Mark?
Hi, Chechin. Good. Thanks for everybody. It's been a pleasure to join this session, and I fully agree with the comments that people have been made. But I think in terms of the question, to answer very briefly, which I know Chechin likes, is what sectors may present the best opportunities for the private sector. And I think traditionally it's been very much the energy and transport sectors in ASEAN, with over 70% of investment going into those sectors. So as Nuj said, renewable energy projects, I think, are going to be good opportunities moving forward. On the transport side, the subsectors have been ports, airports, and road. Of course, ports and airports have been severely impacted by the pandemic. So I think moving forward, investors will be a little bit more reticent looking at greenfield port and airport projects. But I think road projects, there will still be a lot of interest. And if we look around the world where governments have basically lifted travel restrictions domestically, there's been a huge rebound in traffic, particularly commercial traffic on roads. So I think well-structured road projects will be sought after, although maybe some nervousness about taking a demand risk. I think two sectors which will have increasing opportunities moving forward will be the health sector and obviously the IT sector. I think the pandemic has shown that having a very up-to-date modern healthcare system is critical for countries, and also having a robust, essentially infrastructure, IT backbone in the country is important as well. And just to pick up on what Anuj said at the end, one sector that has been has missed out a little bit and very, very important is the water sector in terms of wastewater and water supply. The private sector has been traditionally a little bit reluctant to invest in water projects because of revenue risk and cost recovery. Mostly in developing and emerging markets, the water tariffs are quite low, and as a result, they don't basically cover the cost of the private sector investing in a project. That's the cost and financing costs. So it's very difficult to invest in these projects unless there's support from the government. So renewable energy, I think health, IT, roads, and water, I think there's lots of opportunities moving forward. Back to you, Jane.
Thank you very much, Mark, and all the panelists for your enlightening answers that covers a very wide range of issues, from transparency to standards to life cycle to pathway to private sector participation to specific sector as Mark has outlined. So once we have all these different projects and principles, then how do we make it happen? So I will probably go to the next set of questions on how we want to address this. So I will have two sets of questions. The first will be to the banks. Project preparation is a critical enabler of this. So what can your respective organization do to provide such support and improve bankability in that context? So perhaps I will start with Evadas first, and then go to Anuj and then Mark.
All right, thank you. It's hard to start first because I have so many thoughts in my head. I will have to focus just on probably two or so. So the project preparation is actually a very critical point, in particular when we develop and prepare projects in countries with weaker institutional maybe structures in place. There, of course, we always try to mobilize certain technical assistance, and very often we do that with the help of the European Union. What I mentioned already, the IFE Asia Infrastructure Investment Facility. So it's very important that going forward, these type of technical assistance preparatory facilities are available and remain in place. Otherwise, you cannot very often use the loan proceeds to prepare a project, which takes sometimes a number of years. So this remains very important, and EIB, in fact, is very well equipped to provide technical expertise, because EIB has a bit of unique structure. We have our own so-called projects directorate. So these are the experts, engineers, economists, which we have in-house. So we can rely a lot on our own internal resources and expertise, and we offer that expertise to our beneficiaries, to our partner countries. So that's a very attractive feature of the EIB, but then we cannot do everything. That's why we also team up with the ADB and with others. Then the other aspect which I wanted to touch is when you say, how do we make this happen? Of course, doing everything, you know, from budgetary resources is not a solution. We need to go to the capital markets, and EIB, as one of the largest multilateral issuers of bonds on capital markets, you know, we are very well placed to mobilize those rather significant amounts of private capital for projects that will be needed, because infrastructure projects very often they are you know, hundreds of millions, if not billions of euros or dollars type of projects. So for that, you need to have access to capital markets. And this means that sometimes relatively modest amounts that you invest upfront in project preparation, as you correctly noticed and pointed out, can unlock very significant amounts of access that institutions like EIB, but also ADB, World Bank and others, the World Bank and others can give as a result. So that's where I will stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Anuj?
Yeah, thank you very much. Couldn't agree more. Edvardo's, picked up so many points. I'll break it up into 5 things. I think there's no substitute for project preparation. So the PDFs are a good idea. They should be in place. And I think a lot of people are trying that. But I think more than PDFs, you need a bunch of steps. So the second thing is funds. I think you need a push fund. Project preparation is like a pull. We've got some grant money, we'll help you prepare projects, fine. But you actually need something. And there's a great example from India when they tried to develop the urban sector, where they created a huge pot of money and said 20% money available as grant money. If you have a well-prepared project, come to us. And then things happen. When the funds are there and local government sponsors can see that they can get cheap concessional funds, they will find the expertise to prepare the projects. So I think that's an extremely strong strategy. Third is champions. I worked on a project developing a waste to energy project, did all of this fancy stuff. And right at the end, the local government guy changed and the land was given over for real estate from waste to energy. So you've got to develop the champions. And I think there's no substitute for we're trying to do something with InfraAsia, take ASEAN officials, build their knowledge of innovative finance, leveraging. And that is a long-term process which has to be done. Fourth is templates. For some projects, rather than go through a structuring on every, water or, hard transport sector, let's have 2 or 3 templates. This is mass transit, revenue model, have a standard template and let's apply it. Won't apply everywhere, but it'll rejig the market. It was done in the road sector in India and PPPs. And last is, I think, very critical is what Edvardo's mentioned, which is financing vehicles. So, vehicles which could be a pooled vehicle created at a national level, your classic green fund, blue fund, which could also then do bonds to raise money from the capital markets, which could then be used for some of the other things. That's my quick submission. Thanks.
Thank you, Anuj. Mark?
Yeah, I think we all agree, of course, that prepared projects are essential to get these projects done. And I know this from personal experience, because before I joined the bank 4 years ago, I was in the commercial banking sector. My last role was head of project finance for Asia for SMBC. So we had money to lend, but the issue was we couldn't find bankable projects because the wrong projects were coming out and they weren't structured properly. But just as important, I think, as having projects properly prepared, I think it's very important that governments have strong enabling environments that can support private sector investment and give investors confidence to invest money in those countries. It's also important for governments to basically prioritize projects and carefully select those projects they put out to tender to the private sector. Because I think there's sometimes a fallacy or a misunderstanding of many governments that the public sector or the private sector, sorry, can do all sorts of projects, and that's not the case. Not all projects are appropriate for public sector or private sector participation. From the bank's perspective, what can we do? Well, we can provide support all the way from the upstream to the downstream, from policy to projects. We can provide upstream support in terms of strengthening the institutional, legal, and regulatory enabling environments in these countries. We can support governments putting frameworks and managing fiscal commitments, putting in frameworks for PPP procurement, policies, proposals. And one of the facilities you have to do that is the Public-Private Infrastructure Advisory Facility, PIAF. So PIAF has been in existence for over 20 years, and it provides grants to governments to basically strengthen the upstream. At the moment, using grant money from PIAF, we're doing upstream work in Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam, alongside, of course, entities such as AB. And moving to the downstream, we can obviously provide project definition, project preparation support, and we have the Global Infrastructure Facility that can do that. And outside of the World Bank, but within the World Bank group, of course, we have IC, and IC can provide transaction advisory services. It can advise implementing agencies on how to do projects. And a good example of that is that IC is currently advising the Ministry of Construction in Myanmar on the Yangon Elevated Expressway, which is currently being procured as a PPP project. And of course, on top of that, IC can put equity and money into projects to try and mobilize private sector investment. Finally, of course, we have MEGA that can provide political risk insurance to investors and lenders, and also provide support for non-honouring of sovereign obligations. So there's a lot of support that the bank can provide in order to strengthen enabling environments and to encourage private investment. Because as my colleague mentioned, I think private sector investment is going to be critical moving forward in order to meet the infrastructure deficit in ASEAN.
Thank you very much, Mark. So thank you for sharing all the wide array of possible tools that we can look at. Happy to hear PDFs, grants, champions, standardized contract to some extent. I think ASEAN Finance Track is also working on that to have some form of an agreement or contract where 50% of the contract is already been discussed in advance. So subsequent 50% will be tailor-made to the specific conditions. And public-private partnership and advisory services and strengthening the capital market and so on. The challenge is if you are starting from a place where you don't have a strong capital market, then cost is going to be high. So how do you address that particular issue? Let me now, I think we still have probably 10-15 minutes. Let me now quickly move to one more set of questions before we entertain some of the questions from the audience. So, so having a risk management approach is important to successful infrastructure projects. What are the risks that companies consider when taking on sustainable infrastructure projects? And how can private companies play a role in supporting a faster transition towards sustainable infrastructure in terms of tools, in terms of technologies, and so on? So for this question, I will address it to Chris as well as Johan. So Chris, you want to start first?
Yeah, thank you. I think in terms of risks, of course, there are a whole range of risks that either the private financiers would look at, or indeed the private contractors would look at. And there will be things like regulatory risk. First of all, if we're talking about a PPP project or using private sector financing for things, regulatory risk will feature very highly for them. They need governments to provide a very stable regulatory regime, not be changing laws in the near future. Political risk also falls into that, although I must say in ASEAN we are, for the large part, very politically stable. Environmental risks, social risks, they would all fall into it. So making sure that there are good environmental impact assessments done as part of that project preparation period that the other gentlemen were just talking about will be absolutely crucial for anyone in the private sector who's looking to invest funds or get involved in a project. And then looking at the social aspects of it as well. So we've seen examples of projects in ASEAN, large dam construction projects in Laos, for instance, that end up displacing lots of villages. Whether you'd better finance that sort of thing through the private sector these days would be perhaps very questionable, because the social risks of it are perhaps too great for many in the private sector. There's a whole range of risks there that need to be looked at. The gentleman just now were talking about different financing mechanisms as well. I think there is not a lack of money in Southeast Asia, there's a lack of usable money. And so de-risking some of that and getting some of that money to be flowing better for long-term projects that we need in the region, I think is absolutely key.
Johan?
Yeah, that's, you know, as a supplier of technology, we're kind of one step further away. So we don't have only the risk of the actual infrastructure development project and the financing of that, but also then the contractors, the main contractors that execute that. So we obviously screen these projects very carefully. You know, firstly, from a technical standpoint, can we comply? Is there a clear understanding of what we need to do? Then in terms of governance, we screen very carefully, you know, for any possible risks and so on. And there are some of the developing countries where, I mean, there was a point in time where I know in one of the countries we screened out 50% of opportunities that we saw because we simply couldn't execute based on our values and our culture. That is dramatically improved over the last few years, which is a very positive sign. And I say the contribution we bring, I think, is what's very important for me as a European company operating in infrastructure in ASEAN is a local footprint and local people involved in these projects, because the context is different from Europe. And if we cannot simply transfer this is the tropics. So technically there's some challenges that we need to overcome. You know, what end users need and, you know, things like subsidies and so on, you can't just wish those away. It takes time to remove those. So we need innovative local thought leadership where we participate in the ecosystem, and we want to play our role and make sure that we help to get the best possible outcomes.
Thank you very much. I haven't seen any question yet at this point. So we like to encourage anyone who have any question to ask them through the chat function. If not, I will ask one final question before we close this session. So okay, so let me ask all the panelists a 1 minute, one question with a 1 minute answer. So ASEAN has developed the initial pipeline for infrastructure projects. What are the actionable measures that we can take to deliver this pipeline successfully, taking into account of the current COVID-19 pandemic and part of the post-pandemic recovery plan as well? So 1 minute each. Maybe I'll start from the reverse this time. Mark first from the World Bank.
Well, I think in terms of developing the pipeline, I think that was the question. I think we've all agreed with the fact that capacity building, project preparation is very essential to get these projects done and out of the pipeline. So I think for the pipeline to be a success, it's important these projects are implemented. So it's important these projects are prepared properly. Unfortunately, the capacity to do this varies from country to country and ministry to ministry. So I think at the regional level, ASEAN may be able to provide some support to various implementing agencies and governments to help implement some of these projects. An example of this could be through an ASEAN dedicated project preparation facility. I'm not sure if that is something that's possible, but we've heard from Manoj and a couple of the others that these project preparation funds are useful and they do work. I also think it's important that ASEAN at the regional level helps support the discussions between the various countries, because, you know, connectivity projects by definition involve 2 or more countries, and quite often countries move forward at different speeds. So country A may want to move ahead with a project, country B doesn't, but I think it'll be useful for ASEAN to try and move these discussions along very quickly. And I guess finally, it's very important this pipeline maintains credibility. I think it's important that these projects or the pipelines refreshed. So, you know, projects that are not moving forward should be taken out of the pipeline and new projects added, because I think we're all very familiar with the fact that governments typically announce pipelines of projects. You go back to those pipelines in 3 or 4 years' time, and it's the same projects in the pipeline, and very few of those have moved forward. So I think it's very important for investors that the pipeline is relevant and is credible. And I think for that, you know, projects should be moved on, new projects should be moved off.
Thank you, Mark. Anuj?
Yes, you know, four-pronged. I seem to have numbers for every answer I have now, but 4 pillars. You know, the first thing is, if you have a, you know, this, I haven't seen your set of projects, but if the ASEAN has a set of projects, obvious thing is to have something go to the market fast to show, you know, because impact is critical. So I'd say, you know, look for the low-hanging fruit out of that, which may not be projects which are classic PPPs, but just well-developed projects where private sector can come in on contracting basis, have green indicators. I'd pick that first and try and move those fastest. I would have a project preparation facility, as Mark was also suggesting, which should take some of the more complicated projects, which should be for developing the financial structures and models, and doing all the difficult stuff, land acquisition, environmental, you know, impact assessments, etc. I would also, in addition to a project preparation facility, I would actually say, you know, have an institutional development facility also. And this is working with some of your project sponsors on your list. So is it a local government? Can we help create an SPV structure? Can we do some credit rating of SOEs? Because the thing right now is a lot of SOEs are looking for financing. So it's a great opportunity, if you have it in your list, to try and improve their governance, their ratings, help them develop, you know, finance raising techniques through a bond structure. Probably those are the 3 key things. The funds, you know, would be the last thing, where you create the concessional funds for your projects to get appetite from the market fast. Thanks, Rick.
Thank you, Anuj. Evadas?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for this excellent event. It was really good, and I'm happy to know that the second panel enjoyed much better connectivity. Maybe technology a little bit took a softer turn on us. Now, for your question, I see you're trying to see how, you know, COVID-19 really influences the pipeline, and the starting point is that having pipeline and the effort that ASEAN has made in building the pipeline is already really good, because it gave us and others an opportunity to look at it jointly and to have discussions. We had technical expert discussions.
So we have connectivity.
And we
are back.
Edvardas got jinxed just as he was.
Exactly.
Sorry, Evadas. Maybe I will go to Johan first. We will get back to you once we get back.
Great. So, I mean, again, I'm going to come in not purely from a financing standpoint, but just generally rolling out infrastructure and impact of COVID. So, execute on the plans would be my message to ASEAN. And I really believe in that idea of keep that pipeline alive, continuously look at priorities, kill the ones that don't have traction, and add ones that bring value. I think time is precious, and there's in every country, governments are thinking about how to stimulate the economy, how to create jobs. This is a brilliant opportunity. So I think the more of that funds that can be directed to sustainable infrastructure, you know, using as much local confidence and participation as possible, I think that's a fantastic opportunity that will leave a great legacy for future generations. And if I look at that pipeline, I have to say, increase the level of ambition. We can do more, and we need to do more. You know, that's what we owe the societies that we are responsible for.
Thanks, Johan. So the pipeline is our first step, which we hope will make a footprint towards a path to sustainable infrastructure. So,
yeah, I do think COVID-19, I think as I said at the beginning and others have said as well, is going to have a huge impact on available funds in the public purse. And therefore, making sure you have a pipeline of projects which are going to be in a fit state to attract private financing, I think is going to be key to delivering on that pipeline. And the current set of priority projects under the master plan for ASEAN connectivity, which I think was around 17 projects, I believe only about half of those were projects that had been identified as being suitable for PPP. Not that PPP is the only solution in town, of course. So I think reviewing that pipeline, checking what's really there, what's really viable, what's really needed today, and as Johan and as Anuj and Edvardas were saying as well, backfilling that pipeline with new projects which stand a chance to start running. And I think the other way of making sure you can deliver on it, as I said earlier, is putting in place the proper foundations across the region for it. So that does mean changing some rules and regulations in some countries to allow access to other sources of private sector funding, like pension schemes from insurance companies. It will mean standardized contracts, standardized documentation, standardizing on ESG standards, because all of that will make the private sector a lot more comfortable when it comes to financing it and indeed then executing those projects.
Thanks, Chris. I will go back to Edvardas. So, Edvardas, you're connected with us again. Please.
Thank you. And apologies, I got disconnected. The computer went black out completely. But look, just to finish, I need 30 seconds really. There are some new areas like the water and sanitation that maybe we could have a fresh look at. And another point I wanted to make, that the European Union has led the initiative to mobilize financial resources for countries affected by COVID outside of the European Union, of course. There was the so-called pledging conference, Global Goal Unite for our future summit, where 16 billion euros have been pledged, of which 4.9 billion euros, this is EIB's and European Commission's commitment. So rather significant amounts, very much addressing the COVID-19 thematic, but I think that it's also an opportunity for us to revisit the pipeline, to see perhaps we can open the pipeline and address some of other relevant needs in view of the new realities brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. On this note, thank you so much for allowing me to conclude my small intervention here, and it was really a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Let's give a round of applause to our distinguished panelists this afternoon or this morning. So thank you very much, Caroline, Chris, Johan, Edvardas, Anuj, Mark. So I will keep it short. I think strengthening the partnership between public and private sector, well-designed projects, strengthening the capacity of implementation from governments as well as the private sector, sustainable financing are all key ingredients to implementing sustainable and resilient infrastructure projects. So I like to refer back to what Caroline mentioned in her presentation at the beginning. I mean, due to COVID-19, now we are trying to build back better. But I think we should also be building forward better together. So, so let's build back better and build forward together better. So with that, let me thank the speakers, the organizers, and all of you for your active participation. I will hand over to the MC for some final words. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
Director Lim, and all speakers for the very interactive dialogue. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, That wraps up our seminar. We hope the sessions have been useful to all of you. On behalf of the organizers, we thank you for making your time from your busy schedules to join us today. We wish you all a pleasant day and hope to see you in other opportunities. Thank you, everyone, and please have a round of applause. Thank you. Goodbye.